podcast contains potentially adult language, adult themes, definitely drinking, and possibly sexual context. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you, Susan, for telling me this.
This meeting is being recorded. It freaked me out the first time they put that feature in for part of the podcast here. And
like, who's talking? Oh my God!
What happened?
Who's that woman?
So, welcome to Drinking with Authors, the podcast. Obviously, the podcast. Anyway, I'm your host, Erica Lance. My co-host today is
Valerie Willis. It's been a while.
Valerie's going to come to say our guest name. No, she's not. I didn't think she would.
No, it's Keith. I know. I can say the first name. Last name, I'm not so good at. DeCandido.
DeCandido.
There we go.
I was about to do it. Val,
I'm so embarrassed.
Super.
Okay, it's fine. I have spent all 52 years of my existence on this earth correcting people's mispronunciations of this name. I hope to spend the next 52 years correcting people's mispronunciations of the name.
I love that. And you went, you know what? I'm going to publish under that because that's going to make that easy.
It's my name, you know.
No, there's the...
Okay. Let's talk, before we go down the rabbit hole, let's talk about what we're drinking because I'm super excited about this. We tell people what we're drinking so they can drink along. I found Kettle One. I'm holding it up for those that are watching YouTube. Kettle One Botanical Vodka Spritz.
Botanical?
Peach and orange blossom. It's botanical. I don't know.
Sounds like shampoo.
That means it has plants in it. Yeah. So it's got vegetables, so it's healthy. It's
healthy. Yeah.
It totally. A lot of alcohol, and it's the jury's going to be out on this. I might end up midway through this putting some shots in it because. It only has 73 calories. Val, what are you drinking?
Irish coffee.
I introduced her to these things.
What libation have you placed in your coffee?
What was it? I just grabbed a thing. My husband does the buy. I don't drink often, so I'm like, what do I put in this? And he's like, here, this stuff, and I'm like, okay. And then I do the same thing at Erica's. What was it? A hot toddy? I don't know what that was, but
I'm gonna drink on my alcohol.
I do not drink unless I'm on the podcast, so I get pretty shit faced.
Well, Irish whiskey is the usual thing, I'm reminded.
Rum in that, and that's what she's drinking is coffee with rum in it.
Yeah, it's probably coffee with like Captain Morgan's or something in it.
There you go. I find myself reminded of a story Arlo Guthrie told one time about when he was younger and he was feeling down. So an older musician named Ramblin' Jack Elliott gave him something. He said, "What is it?" He said, "Don't worry, it'll wear off."
Yeah, no, it's okay. Keith, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a red wine called Her Name is Rioja, which is a play on Her Name is Rio. For those of you watching on YouTube, you can see the retro 80s Duran Duran style cover. I am part of a group who call ourselves The Crew because we couldn't come up with a better name. The group includes several fellow authors, including David Mack, Aaron Rosenberg, Ilana C. Meyer, and I'm Jennifer Purcell Rosenberg.
And the one person you don't mention is going to reach out after this podcast and go,
"Yes,
my chopped liver."
Yeah, and there are some other people who are not writers but who are in the publishing business or friends of or spouses of people in the publishing business, or ex-spouses of people in the publishing business. Anyway, we make our own wine with a company out in New Jersey called Make Wine With Us, where we pick the grapes and we help do bits of it and then they ferment it for us. We just bottled our latest one, which is a Montepulciano called the Full Monty.
Get this wine. I need this wine in my life.
You need it in your life.
We talk. If you get in touch with me, we made a limited number of stuff that we ourselves made, but we might be willing to part with some of it for a price. Well,
we're going to
get in touch with me after the recording.
Yeah, because 3.6%. I don't know what the fuck I was thinking. I should have put that in a cup.
We as we record this, we just bottled the Full Monty, but it probably won't be ready until around the end. The earliest it'll be ready is like the end of 2021.
no, that's still, I'm all about the full Monty.
And that one, the cover on that one is also a riff on an existing piece of art. In this case, the movie poster for the Full Monty, which you'll recall.
No, that's why I'm saying I'm going to.
Well, except what we use.
Podcast. Let's do it.
What we use instead of an adult male wearing boots was the statue of Michelangelo's David wearing the brown boots.
That is brilliant.
That is awesome. The first time I experienced the Full Monty was the Broadway show, which was fantastic.
Experienced. That's what they're calling it these days. Yes.
Movie, or are you literally talking about a man naked in front of you in boots?
Why does everything I say
have to be twisted? She's sticking to it.
Because you literally started that off with the first time I experienced the Full Monty.
It was the Broadway show first, Justin later.
I'll take your word for it.
Oh my gosh. Okay, back to writing now.
All right, writing, yes.
Okay, Keith, for the audience members that are still listening after Val's Full Monty story, what do you write?
Words, mostly.
That's cool.
I suppose I should be more specific. I am a novelist, short story writer, essayist, columnist, critic, comic book writer, pretty much whatever they'll pay me for. The vast majority of my output has been novels. I've written upwards of 60 novels at this point.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Most of them in the science fiction, fantasy, and or horror genres. Couple mysteries here and there. I recently did a thriller as well. And I've written, somewhere between 75 and 100 short stories, a mess of comic books here and there, and more nonfiction than I'm frankly willing to count. For the last 10 years, I have been writing regularly for Tor.com, writing about pop culture for them. I've written, the novels I've written have been both in my own universes, including urban fantasy set in New York and Key West, and fantastical police procedurals in the fictional cities of Super City and Cliff's End, including the Precinct series and the Super City Cops stories. The urban fantasies include The Adventures of Bram Gold and the Tales of Cassie Zukov, Weirdness Magnet. And then I've also written in well over 30 different licensed universes, from Alien to Zorro, and also including things like Farscape, Doctor Who, Supernatural, World of Warcraft, Resident Evil, Orphan Black, various Marvel superheroes I've written in prose, and probably some others I'm forgetting because, I've been drinking.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I saw Supernatural on there. Like, I was looking, because we cyberstalk our guests.
Well, yes. That's like, why I put all that stuff on the internet, is so people can find it. Yeah,
well, it made it very easy, really, actually. Yeah. So you have spanned so many nerddoms that I completely love. And no, seriously, just a jealousy thing. I'm looking and I'm like, Star Trek, Doctor Who, Supernatural, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yes. I'm like, how do I get this job? Like, seriously, how do I get this job where I can write for all of these different things that I absolutely love? Aliens, my favorite movie of all time. So I need you to explain in great detail through the, just kidding, how I do this. But just lucky. I think that's fantastic, because writing your own stuff, I think, is amazing and awesome. But being able to write in some of the universes that you love, man, that's and get paid for it. And it's not just fanfic where you're like, I wonder if Castile and Dean got together. Like, if I hear one more of those, I swear to God.
What about Dean and Buffy? Isn't there the new, the shipping of those two?
Okay. Sidetracking topic. Anyway, how much of that is actually coffee versus how much of it is whatever the hell you just made up you put in that cup? Whatever. Moving on. When did you start?
I started professionally writing in 1989. Writing nonfiction. I was writing articles for Library Journal magazine and for the Comics Journal, writing reviews for Library Journal, Publishers Weekly, and a few other school library journals, some other places. And I wrote very briefly. I had a comic book column for Cream magazine that didn't last very long. wrote for Wilson Library Bulletin and a few other places. And then finally in 1994, I sold my first short story. You guys interview authors all the time, so you know that everybody has their own story for how they broke in. And if you ask any 10 writers how they broke in, you're going to get 12 different stories.
Right.
Having said that, mine is particularly bizarre and non-replicable. So I was...
More spritzer. Do tell.
More spritzer, yes. So I was working for the late Byron Price. He was book packager. And he had just gotten the rights to do prose novels and short stories based on Marvel superheroes.
Oh,
nice.
I was an editor working for Byron at the time, and I was the editor in charge of that project. And excuse me. And I have to say, just independent of the writing part of it, that project as an editor is one of the things I'm proudest of in my career. Between 1994 and 2000, we did over 50 books, both novels and short story anthologies, featuring Spider-Man, the X-Men, Captain America, the Avengers, Iron Man, the Hulk, Fantastic Four, and they were all interconnected. I have joked that until 2008, the novel thing that I did was the largest interconnected series of Marvel stories not told in comic book form ever. And then Kevin Feige went and stole my thunder, the bastard. But we unlike there have been other series of Marvel novels, but they were all standalone. One of the conscious things I did was that these novels were all consistent with each other and picked up on themes from each other. And we had recurring characters who were in several of the books as well. And I was just, it was a lot of fun to do. We had some great books in there. We used both science fiction writers and comic book writers. People like Tom DeFalco, Peter David, Ann Nocenti. Who else? I'm blanking on all the names.
That's okay, because the more
David Michelinie,
through the podcast,
Kurt Busiek,
the more names you forget.
Kurt Busiek, and a lot of science fiction writers: Adam Troy Castro, Greg Cox, Steve Wesley Smith, Pierce Askegren, a whole bunch of others. And anyway, so we started that project with a Spider-Man novel by Diane Duane and a Spider-Man anthology. And the anthology had, this was all like crash done because it took Byron 18 months to negotiate this license.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And by the time he finally got the license done and had shelled out a ridiculous amount of money to the Marvel Entertainment Group to do this, he wanted the books out and earning money as fast as humanly possible. So Diane wrote at light speed to get her novel done, and we put this anthology together. And we had the cover done before any of the stories were even done. We just did a sort of generic cover. You had Spider-Man in the middle, and then 4 of his villains on the 4 corners. And we had stories with 3 of those villains. We had the Vulture, Dr. Octopus, the Lizard, and Venom. We had a Doc Ock story. We had a Lizard story. We had a Vulture story. In fact, we had 2 Vulture stories. We did not have a Venom story. And this was 1994, when Venom was at the absolute height of his popularity. The character had been introduced in 1989, I want to say. And so, and by 94 had had his own miniseries. He was like putting him on the cover, spiked sales by like 10,000. It was, we had to have a Venom story. In fact, Venom was also the focus of Diane's novel. And so we had pitched, 6 different stories from 6 different authors to Marvel, all of which they rejected. Let me backtrack by explaining to the people listening to this who may not know. When you're writing licensed fiction like this, when you're writing, a Supernatural book, a Buffy book, a Marvel book, a Star Trek book, a Star Wars book, whatever, first you have to write a plot outline that has to be approved by the people who own it. So if, for example, I'm writing a Supernatural novel, I have to write a plot outline that somebody at Warner Brothers has to approve. In the case of Spider-Man, or Spider-Man short story, we had to write a pitch that somebody at Marvel had to approve. They didn't approve a lot of pitches. Finally, we're at the 11th hour, and my co-editor and I, John Betancourt, said, look, what do you want in a Venom story? They gave us a sentence. We didn't even have time to assign it to anybody. I went home, I wrote a draft of a short story like overnight, gave it to John. He completely tore it apart, rewrote it from the ground up, gave it back to me. I tore it apart, rewrote it from the ground up, gave it back to him. And that was my first short story sale. It was me and John Gregory Betancourt writing a short story called An Evening in the Bronx with Venom, which appeared in The Ultimate Spider-Man in 1994.
Nice.
So, and that's how I got my first short story sale, because Marvel wouldn't approve any damn outlines. After that, I did a bunch more. Working for Byron gave me opportunities to pitch, because I was working with a lot of people who were also editing anthologies featuring other characters. So I got to do a Magic the Gathering story for one of their anthologies. I got to do a Doctor Who story because it was co-edited by Andrew Lane, who had written an X-Men story and another story for another anthology for me, where I was the editor. And he mentioned in passing that he was doing a Doctor Who anthology. And I'm like, oh! You know?
Yes, that's exactly how you...
Yes.
Me.
Yeah.
Don't forget about me.
Yeah, I was like Donkey in Shrek. Pick me! And because of that, I have the completely irrelevant distinction of being the first native-born American citizen to write linear adult Doctor Who fiction. I have to qualify it that much because John Peel is a naturalized American citizen, and another American wrote a kids' choose your own adventure thing, a guy named William H. Keith. So, but if you don't count them, I was the first American to write official Doctor Who fiction.
Wow.
That's awesome.
With a short story I wrote in 1996 called United We Fall, which was in an anthology called Decalogue 3, which was published by Virgin. It was the last of the Decalogue anthologies that Virgin did before they lost the license to the BBC. And also in that story, in that anthology rather, was the first ever Doctor Who story by some guy named Stephen Moffat.
That guy.
Who I always thought understood Doctor Who really well and always wondered what happened to him. No, actually, the story he wrote for that was called Continuity Errors, and it was a brilliant story. And in many ways, it was kind of the first draft of one of his Christmas episodes. The Christmas Carol Christmas episode was very much the same plot. But I remember reading Continuity and I was thinking, damn, this is good. And when I found out he was writing for the new show, I was thrilled because it's like, okay, this guy knows his stuff from that anthology. But so yeah, it just, and I kept doing other work here and there. My first novel actually came about because Byron was too cheap to give me a raise, so he gave me a novel contract instead.
Interesting.
That's a good choice.
Yeah, it worked. I wrote a Spider-Man novel called Venom's Wrath. I collaborated on it with Jose Nieto partly because I was working a full-time job and I needed help with the writing. It was a sufficiently traumatic experience that Jose swore never to write ever again and has gone into graphic design and is much happier. So, I destroyed one person's career. That was good.
I will be the best writer by eliminating all others I come in contact with.
That wasn't my intent, actually. And Jose's actually a phenomenally good writer, but he just didn't. It's interesting. For him, writing professionally took all the joy out of it.
Yeah.
It was like it stopped being fun. It became a job. And he just didn't like it as much. So he stopped doing it. And he was happier, so, more power to him. But we did that. And then I also did a movie novelization for Tor called Gargantua, which was a Fox TV movie that came out in May of 1998, which starred Adam Baldwin as a marine biologist. So you can tell, what a super serious movie this was.
That's riveting.
Yeah. It was a monster movie that Fox did to cash in on what they were sure was going to be a big craze after the Dean Devlin, Roland Emmerich Godzilla film that was coming out in the summer of 1998. Who knew? Most people are thinking there was a Godzilla movie in 1998. That's how bad that was. But
I witnessed
but
that.
There was, and it tanked. But Fox didn't know that at the time, so they did Gargantua. And I wrote the movie novelization. Which was fun. And it was at that point that I decided to go freelance. I had a couple of other novels under contract. I did a couple of Young Hercules novels. I did my first Buffy book, which was actually also a novelization. It was a novelization of 3 Xander-focused episodes. And I figured, okay, this is something I can make a go at. So I went freelance. I quit my job with Byron. I still worked for him freelance for a while. To help pay the bills, and I was still doing the Marvel project and doing some other stuff, but I cut that back to 2 days a week, and then I wound up quitting for unrelated reasons completely. due to major financial issues. The company that did the Marvel books was a separate company Byron had created called Byron Price Multimedia Company, which was formed in 1992, I want to say, to develop CD-ROMs, because that was the hip new technology at the time. Byron got in on the ground floor of CD-ROMs and also stuck around long enough to see the utter implosion of CD-ROMs as a market. And it got to that combined with Byron trying to do webcomics in the late 90s.
Oh, wow.
When the technology really wasn't up for it yet.
Yeah.
Byron was that most unfortunate of visionaries, is that he had a tendency to either be ahead of his time or 5 years behind the times. It was frustrating sometimes working for him in that regard. But he saw webcomics coming, but like I said, the technology wasn't there. He sunk a lot of money into that, lost a lot of money on CD-ROMs, and it got to the point where the only thing that was making money for him were the Marvel books. And so the money that I was making for the company was not paying my freelancers; it was paying like the electric bill.
Oh wow!
And I couldn't deal with that anymore, and I finally just quit in disgust, which was unfortunate. But I didn't. And at that point, my writing was doing well enough. I had a Star Trek novel under contract. I had a Farscape novel under contract, and I was doing a Star Trek comic book for Wildstorm, and it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth the agita at that point. So.
Okay, which makes total sense. But we're going to go back even further.
We're
going back further. I have a time travel machine that involves heavy amounts of liquor.
Yes.
Yes. What made you decide to even potentially go into this realm? Like go into books, go into comics, I say this because, now is a different time. 10 years ago was a different time. 20 years ago was a different time. Like it's a different time period. And, there's passion jobs you end up being able to do and get in on the ground floor of and stuff like that. But something has to start to begin with to go, I'm going to go down this potentially non-paying route. It's like we got to, talk to Sutter, and he was like, I'm going to go work in gaming. And I'm like, who the hell decides that? Like I started playing D&D when I was 14 and I had to color in the dice, but I never went, I could make a job of doing this.
Well, I had the benefit of being raised by a roving pack of wild librarians.
They're dangerous.
I am a second generation nerd, both a second generation book nerd and a second generation science fiction nerd. My parents are science fiction readers and watchers. I mean, they watched the original Star Trek when it was on the air in the late 60s, and they watched the reruns with me when I was growing up in the 1970s. And they gave me, when I was old enough to read on my own, they gave me Heinlein's YA books, Ursula Le Guin's Earthsea trilogy, The Hobbit, and P.G. Woodhouse's Jeeves and Wooster stories to read, which pretty much set me on the rather unfortunate path that I'm on now.
Now it's fortunate. There were moments in time it was very unfortunate.
And here's the cat.
Hi, and here's the cat making a star appearance.
I fed you. What the hell?
In the production.
Okay.
Cat's like, listen, you're on a call. I had to stop by. I need to.
Yes, this is Kaylee.
Hi, Kaylee.
Hi, Kaylee.
On the screen. But so you grow up, which is fantastic. I think that's amazing. But when do you go, as you're going into, the teenage to adulthood, did you go get educated down this path? What did you do for college and stuff or not?
I studied English literature in college, thus guaranteeing a life of poverty. Will you stop that, Kaylee? For those listening to the audio version, my cat is scent marking the laptop, which is making it bounce. So
awesome! It's awesome. You should watch this, because what happens is you get laptop move, cat butt, move, cat butt. It's pretty awesome. There you go.
Are we done, Kaylee? Okay. Anyway, no, I loved writing. I always all that reading made me want to be the person who created the stories. And besides the stuff my parents gave me, I also started buying comic books when I was a kid, when I was around 8th grade or so. I started buying comic books and collecting them.
Did you
And
first stuff, because you said you wrote a story. Look at words.
Words are hard.
It's fine. Words are very hard. Bunch of writers on a call. Let's have words be hard.
Yeah.
You wrote this story, but did you write anything before that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, they were terrible. But I wrote an entire Star Trek novel in high school, which has been lost to being on a 5 1/4-inch floppy drive and therefore unreadable by any current technology, which is fine. I don't even know where the discs are at this point. And I wrote some other stuff here. And I wrote stuff for what passed for a literary magazine in my high school. And I wrote a lot for the newspapers, both in high school and college. That was like it started me doing the article, the nonfiction. I wrote reviews and articles and stuff. Kaylee, stop it.
Now I believe it's actually like some tentacle creature behind there that's like, I will take your laptop and move it.
It really isn't. It's just a cat. No, I wrote a lot for my high school's newspaper, and then when I got to college, I went to Fordham University here in New York, and I worked for The Paper. That's what it's called, The Paper. It was and still is the alternative paper on campus, and I wrote reviews for the art section freshman year, and then at the end of freshman year, I was invited to take over as arts editor of The Paper, which I did for sophomore and junior year, and then I became executive editor of The Paper senior year. This was very handy, because it made me realize that editing was something I could do for a living until I could get my writing career off the ground, which is exactly what happened. So going to college, besides the English literature degree helping me in my writing by exposing me to great swaths of phenomenal literature, I also found out that editing was something I could do and was good at, and then I got a job working initially for Library Journal out of college, and then I went to work for Byron, which enabled me to earn a living up until such a point as I could do that with writing. So.
Well, I think that's...
And Kaylee agrees.
I see Kaylee agrees. I think that's really awesome. And my question, and then we're going to take a break, is how do you think being an editor affected you as a writer? Because there are, it's two very defined jobs. Like it's, it helps, but they're very defined jobs, right? Being an editor versus a writer.
Oh, yeah. And I always am a firm believer that people should edit other people's work because it helps you see faults in your own work and strengthen it. So
yes, and in fact, that is one way in which it has helped. Editing has helped me make myself a better writer because I look for the same things, the same ridiculous things I see in other people's writing in my own, and I'm less likely to let myself get away with that. So yeah, it also helps. I still do editing. My wife and I are currently editing an anthology that we kickstarted earlier this year called The Four Somethings of the Apocalypse, which we're hoping to have out by the end of the year. We'll see if that happens or not. But
nice.
And I'm also editing some articles for. I occasionally do some freelance editing for the Society for American Baseball Research. And one of the nice things about editorial work is that it's something similar to writing, but it uses different brain muscles. But it's still creative, and it's a good way to sort of reset my brain when the writing is just sort of completely smashed my brain inside out. And it's something that lets me keep a hand and sort of helps me reset the creative muscles in some ways.
That's very cool. Did you say baseball?
Yes.
Are you a baseball fan?
I am, in fact, a baseball fan, yes.
Oh, God, you're like an epic nerd. Like a nerd all over, like splashing nerd, just all over the
super nerd,
sports nerd,
it's funny
sci-fi nerd, and gaming nerd. I'm going to splash my nerddom all over the place.
Yes. And it's funny because for a long time, baseball was the one thing that I could count as just a hobby because I didn't make money off it. And then I started writing. Like I've done the work I've been doing for Sabre and also I did some writing for a couple of baseball annuals about the New York Yankees. And then I also actually had a column for a blog about the Yankees for about 6 months in 2013 until they decided they weren't going to pay writers anymore, and then I stopped doing that.
Oh wow!
And the perception that if you write for a blog you don't need to get paid for it is one that I don't particularly approve of. But and occasional editing here and there. So it's like even baseball I've managed to monetize, which is hey, whatever.
No, I think that's
for the record. I'm also a martial artist, and I'm a nerd for that too. If you want to throw that in there.
He also wrote a book on the New Jersey Devil.
Yes, although that falls into the science fiction, fantasy, horror category.
And we'll cover that in a. You know what? I know you want to ask questions on that, Val. I can already tell this. It's okay. We're going to ask questions, and then Val's going to get embarrassed because of why she has to ask those questions.
Oh, he already knows.
I know, but the audience is here, and there's a camera going. So
they already know if they listen to the 100th episode.
Yeah. Okay. So
I am happy to talk about the Jersey Devil, especially since that's one of my more recent books, and I had a lot of fun with it. So.
Okay. Well, then we will be right back to talk about the New Jersey Devil and Honey Cummings.
You're looking at me. I almost snorted my water out. Thank you.
This is the voice of Drinking with Authors. You are at our commercial break, and our commercial is, hey, do you want to be a guest on our show? Or do you have a question for one of the guests on our show? Or do you have a brilliant drink recipe that we've never heard of? That would have to stump us. But you could reach us at drinkingwithauthors@gmail.com or on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. You can direct message or even just leave a comment on one of our posts. We would absolutely love to hear from you.
And we're back by the creepy recording. I know, it's creepy recording device. So we were about to talk about the New Jersey Devil. It's been like 30 seconds for the audience. So let's talk about the New Jersey Devil. So you, Valerie, actually met Keith at Pensacon.
Yes, I did.
And I'm sure you struck up the topic of the New Jersey Devil.
But Dan Wells started it.
Okay, well, Dan Wells starts a lot.
Dan's fault. Okay.
It's all Dan's fault.
Dan Wells is an instigator. I hope you're listening, Dan. We know you're an instigator. So he started the New Jersey Devil. Did he start off with what your New Jersey Devil does, Valerie? Or how
No. That came at the back end of the conversation. And even then, I sent an editor to deliver the book because it was too embarrassed to do it myself.
You brought Keith a book, but you didn't bring them. You sent somebody else to bring the book?
I didn't even get into the fact that a journalist reached out wanting to.
This is why I bring this up, Keith. Do you see what just happened there?
Mm-hmm.
So much for her. I'm going to talk about the New Jersey Devil. She's broken now. So let's talk about your New Jersey Devil book.
Yes.
Okay, so there's a series that just started up this year called Systema Paradoxa, which is a series of novellas about cryptids of various sorts. This was done in partnership between eSpec Books, which is a medium press publisher out of New Jersey who publishes my Precinct books. And I've done a bunch of other books with them as well. And they partnered up with Cryptid Crate, which is a subscription service that is all about various and sundry cryptids. And they do t-shirts and books and doodads and merchandise and stuff relating to various creatures. And so I was one of the many authors that they invited to write one of the novellas. And I originally pitched something else, and they decided they didn't want to go for that. So instead, I decided to pitch the Jersey Devil, which they were like, well, we didn't want to do a common one. They wanted to do some of the more obscure cryptids, but they liked my pitch. So they decided to go for it anyhow. And what I wanted to do, and this was actually part of my original pitch that they didn't go for, was the idea that the Jersey Devil actually runs a sanctuary of sorts for different creatures.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And also I hit on the idea that there isn't one Jersey Devil, but there's usually only about one at a time. And as one gets older, a new one is born somehow. And and continues the tradition. And in fact, because I wanted to deal with the biggest set of sightings of the Jersey Devil was in January of 1909, shortly after a winter snowstorm, and there were multiple sightings reported all over central New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania.
Like a dog or a cat was eaten or mauled.
Yeah, there were all sorts of things.
Stuff.
People menacing a trolley and one sitting in a boxcar in Pennsylvania and menacing a speakeasy and others. Or that wasn't a speakeasy. It was a bar, basically. It was a social club in, I want to say, Trenton, and a bunch of other stuff. It was like all in 1 week. The more skeptical and cynical types think that this was probably, at least in some part, due to a slow news week and a bunch of journalists getting together to help try to sell newspapers. But regardless, there were a lot of reported sightings that week, one in some form or other. And one of the local museums was, or the Philadelphia Zoo rather, was offering a reward for anybody who could bring them the Jersey Devil. And there was there were all sorts of different sightings and things. So my explanation for that was that there were in fact two of them floating around. One of them had gotten old and sort of wandered, and his daughter was trying to track him down. And I set it in the same setting as my urban fantasy series, The Adventures of Brom Gold, which is the first book was called A Furnace Sealed, and it's about a guy from the Bronx who is a courser who is hired to hunt monsters and track down supernatural creatures and such. For the Systema Paradoxa book, which was called All the Way House, I had it be an Atlantic City-based courser named Valentina Perron, who is hired to track down a creature that has been sighted in the ocean off Atlantic City and is scaring the casino, scaring the people in the casino. And so one of the casino owners hires her to track it down. And it turns out to be one of the people who is one of the creatures that is at this sanctuary that the Jersey Devil runs in the middle of the Pine Barrens. And she has to bring him back home. And then we do have flashbacks to when the coursers found out about the Jersey Devil and their little sanctuary, and then going back to the origins of the Jersey Devil back in the 1700s. So I tried to use as much of the existing lore as possible, but to do a different twist on it. That this isn't just a monster. It's somebody who is different, obviously, doesn't know where they came from, but is trying to help other creatures like them. And the rules of the sanctuary are very specific. If you actually harm people, you're not permitted there. It's only for nice creatures.
Creatures don't eat other people.
Correct. Yes.
People.
Well, I love this. I gotta ask, of course, because I've now opened my second spritz. Do you believe in cryptids? Do you believe they're real?
Probably not. Having said that, I'm pretty sure a lot of what people have decided are cryptids are probably just people with unfortunate mutations or odd things wrong with them, or just odd skin conditions or any number of other things that a less enlightened time considered to be monsters, and which we know better now are simply odd little quirks of genetics. But so I think it's more likely that a lot of a lot of what has been considered cryptids over the years are simply people who don't fit the for lack of a better word, norm. That's my own take. I don't know. No,
I'm curious because there's so much, when you go down the research, which I'm going to ask you next about your research rabbit hole that you go down, and I see you guys both had all the, New Jersey Devils. I mean, Valerie's were playing poker and sleeping with people.
He's a manager at Atlantic City Casino.
Yeah, weird.
It totally makes perfect sense.
Yes, but when you're, when you look at things like this and the research that ends up being done, and did it really happen? Are these leftover creatures from another time and stuff like that just like the Loch Ness, I think my favorite thing I learned recently is now they think that the Loch Ness monster is actually a giant blue whale penis coming out of the water. I'm not kidding. There is an entire show that I saw that was like, yeah, well, if you look at this angle of this thing and the way it comes out of the water when it's mating, and I was like, if it turns out that the Nessie, good old Nessie, is a giant whale dick, I love everything about that right there.
The only other thing I would say is there was a line in a Tim Minchin song called Storm, in which he says that throughout history, every mystery that has ever been solved has been not magic. And it's and I mean the just to give another example, a lot of the legends about vampires are probably from people who either came back from the dead because they didn't know enough to realize that they weren't actually dead, that they were just in a coma. And also, the condition of porphyria, which is one that, mimics a lot of the same things that we associate with vampirism, including sensitivity to garlic. And, there's lots of other, reasonable scientific explanation for things. We just don't know all of them yet. But having said that, that doesn't change the fact that stories about them can be a lot of fun. Throughout history, we've loved telling stories about supernatural creatures of various sorts, whether it's the Greek gods or the Jersey Devil. So,
no, that I agree 100%. Let's talk about your research, because you obviously did research. You just talked about a lot of the legends and the dates of a lot of the legends.
Yeah.
So how far down that research super highway do you go? Because I feel like
pretty far.
You literally gas up the car, add gas to it, and just keep driving. Is that what happens? Does somebody have to go, hey, where the fuck are you going? Does that...
No, it was fun. I mean, doing research is part of the fun for me. That was, like I said, I'm the child of librarians. And so, I love doing research, even if it's just as simple a research as watching all the episodes of a TV show so I can write a novel about it. But no, that's
what a horrible job.
Oh yeah, terrible. Well, it depends on the TV show, but the it's God knows there's plenty of websites out there with various accounts of the Jersey Devil, and I made use of a large number of them. I didn't use everything, obviously. I just went with the stuff that worked for my particular story, and I had to pick and choose because there's lots of contradictory stories too, and I had to pick one or the other. So that was fun, but I enjoyed that part. Some of the most interesting things I've gotten to do has been stuff because I've done research for a book. My favorite research adventure was in 2008. I did a CSI New York novel.
Ooh. Oh. So you went and killed people? No, that wasn't.
No, okay. No, that would be wrong. But
yeah, Erica, that's wrong.
Half my novel was a case in a medium security prison where somebody was killed, and our guys have to investigate it and figure out who did it. And so I got to take a tour. I had a friend who was a correctional officer at the Arthur Kill Penitentiary in Staten Island here in New York. And so he was able to put me in touch with the people at the Department of Corrections who could arrange a tour. And so I got to take a tour of Arthur Kill, and it was great. It was because nobody ever writes about medium security prisons, even though they are by far the most common prisons. They always write about, maximum security prisons or the occasional minimum security prison, but nobody ever talks about the mediums. And those are, that's where, like I said, a lot of the criminals wind up. And it was great. It was really enlightening. Learned lots of interesting things. In fact, the most interesting thing I learned was at the very beginning of it. This is the great thing about some of these things where you talk to experts about things, because they give you these little details. When I first got there, before you even walk in the door, you have to check any electronic devices and any weapons. So I'm giving them my cell phone, and I said, so I guess whenever a cop comes and visits, they have to check their weapons too. And the guy giving me the tour said, yes. And they bitch and moan about it every fucking time. I said, really? Don't they know? It's like, doesn't matter. Every time they say, oh, no, I don't have to check my weapon. It's like, yes, you do check the weapon. And so I worked that into the book.
That is
awesome. When Flack goes there, he has to, he tells him, no, I don't have to check my weapon.
So you've done a lot of shows. I mean, I even see like you did a Cars novel, right?
Comic book, actually. That was a Cars comic.
But what do you seek these out? Do people seek you out at this point? I mean, CSI, like Cars, CSI, like, and then Farscape over here, and then you have
Zorro.
Like, you're not like, listen, I'm only writing sci-fi, and that's the thing. Like, you are all over the freaking place, like everywhere.
The answer to that question is all of those things. Sometimes people seek me out, and sometimes I lobby for it. Sometimes I lobby for it, I don't get it, and then later they seek me out, which is what happened with CSI New York. When they first got the license, I was like, please, let me do it. And my editor said, no, we're going with Stuart Kaminsky, who is an Edgar Award-winning mystery author, and I really couldn't complain. But then
it's very hard when you're like, fine.
Yeah.
Fine.
I would have killed to write a book based on the TV show The Librarians. The person they actually hired was Greg Cox, who was like the most qualified person to write a librarian. Like if I was editing Librarian's book, Greg would have been the first person on my list. So I can't complain about that. So in the case of CSI New York, Stuart wrote 3 novels. And the reason why he wrote 3 novels is because he did not want to write a 4th. Stuart had never done tie-in fiction before, and he chafed under the restrictions. And by the time it got to the 4th book, it's like, I don't want to deal with this crap anymore. And so Jennifer Heddle, who was the editor, came to me and said, hey, remember how you said you wanted to write CSI New York books? I said, yes. She said, well.
Here are the ones you need to write now.
Yes. We've got one more in the contract, and how'd you like to do it? And I said, sure. Of course, the punchline in this was that I'd actually stopped watching CSI New York. But when they were first pitching it, the show hadn't debuted yet. It was like, there had been like the backdoor pilot on CSI Miami, but that was it. And I was really excited about it because I'm from New York and I love writing about New York. If you look at my bibliography, you will see that I write things set in my hometown a lot. But by the time Jen came to me with the thing, I was like, oh, sure, yes, I love the show. He says lying. Because I really, the show annoyed me in a lot of ways. But it was, and I had given up on it, but I went back and picked back up on it again, and I binged it, and I enjoyed writing about it. It was, as I joked, it was like there should be at least one person writing a CSI New York story to actually, been to New York.
That's a wild concept. We talk about that a lot on this show, is writing in areas that you're not from and then you don't do enough research on. So pretty much anybody who's from there is like, what the hell are they saying?
One of the best compliments I ever got actually was from, I did an X-Files short story that was set in El Paso, Texas. And a native of El Paso said I did fine with it, that I didn't do anything wrong. Everything looked right and felt right, and I didn't do wrong by his city, and that made me feel much better. Because it's hard, you don't want to just be stuck doing the Google Maps version of the city.
You also mentioned that you do a lot of settings in Key West.
Yes.
Why Key West of all places? If New York's your hometown, why Key West? Key West
is my favorite place in the world that isn't New York. It's I've been going there on and off for vacations since 1993. And in fact, my wife and I are trying to figure out if it's safe for us to go back sometime.
We live in Florida. Do not come back here now.
No, I know.
Right now, do not come back to Florida.
Yeah. But no, I love it there. And I've been wanting to write stories set there. It's a perfect place to do urban fantasy, really.
Did you visit Robert the Doll?
Yeah, did you visit Robert the Doll?
Not only have I visited Robert the Doll, but one of my short stories is a riff on Robert the Doll. It's called William the Doll because it's fiction. But the story is called William Did It. It was It was on a website subscription service called Story of the Month Club, which they then reprinted in one of their yearly anthologies. I'm finally got enough stories together that I'm going to do a second short story collection. The first one was called Ragnarok and Roll, which came out in 2013. The follow-up volume will be called Ragnarok in a Hard Place.
I love fun.
And because the stories involve scuba diving, rock and roll music, Norse gods, folklore, and beer drinking, not necessarily in that order. So,
wow. I'm on board for all of that, but the scuba diving, all of it.
But the scuba diving plays a part in some of the stories, at least.
No, that's very cool. So, I got to ask you about fans in these being in these universes, because fans of existing universes can be some of the most delightful human beings and some of the weirdest fucking human beings in the entire world.
That sums it up, yes.
Yeah. What has been your experience with that when people come and you've written their Buffy the Vampire Slayer novel?
Mostly it's been great. The vast majority of my experiences have been completely positive. There are obviously exceptions, and every fandom has its nut bar contingent. But you know, yeah, that's part of the job.
Well, we
mostly
need
it's
the
been
weirdest that realm fan experience, because then we're going to have to ask you for your books the weirdest fan experience. So let's go into the realms you write for. What is your weirdest experience you had with a fan?
Oh, probably the Supernatural fan who accused me of getting the gig solely to game my ex-wife out of getting the gig. Meanwhile, back in the real world, my ex-wife is the one who turned me on to Supernatural and beta read my book. And was too busy working on her doctoral dissertation to have even considered writing a novel. So both Marina and I went and corrected that misapprehension right quick. And the post was taken down. This was on LiveJournal, which will tell you how long ago it was. But that was the most unfortunate, probably. Plus, of course, I should also mention all the lovely people who came out of the woodwork on Twitter to tell me that I was a complete and total idiot for not liking Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Wow.
Although that was more for my nonfiction, because I for Tor.com
or the remade one.
The 4-hour director's cut version that they put on HBO Max.
You gotta love Twitter. Twitter is such a delightful place for humans.
Oh yeah, it was great. And those are probably the two worst.
What about in person? Has anybody dressed up as your characters from your book?
Not yet. Somebody dressed up as me once.
Why is it?
Jonathan Mayberry and
Jeff Strand
have had this too. Tell us about your story.
This was the son of a very close friend of mine who loves. He mostly doesn't read fiction, but he loves the Precinct books. He's more of a nonfiction reader. He likes reading like history books and stuff like that. But he loves Dragon Precinct and its sequels. And one time at a convention in the Baltimore area, he showed up wearing the Yankees Hawaiian shirt that I like to wear, and a red shirt under it, and with hair and the glasses and all the rest of it. And there are pictures of the two of us together. It was great.
You gotta love moments like that. I think, people don't realize how much as authors, it's really neat to meet fans and fans of our work. And, I always throw the gauntlet down for anybody listening that come cosplay as one of Keith's characters. Come do that, because I think it's a severe compliment. But, I see people even being like tentative about going and talking to authors. And I'm like, the majority of them, go talk to them. They want to hear what you think. They want, don't go be a butthead, but we want to hear from you. We want to hear that you liked what we did or it impacted you in some way, because that's kind of why we're doing it, Yeah.
It's harder with literary characters. I mean, you look at the vast majority of costumes that people do, and it's usually something from a visual medium, whether it's comics or movies or TV shows or anime. Just because you've got a visual template, you don't have to, base it on a physical description.
Yes, but the good cosplayers, I'm one of them, base it on a physical description and not a visual. Because I think, this is my new thing as we're coming out of, well, we're in Florida, so we're not really coming out of yet. But when we eventually get out of this realm where we can go back to conventions and stuff like that, I've now decided, I was talking to somebody about it today. I'm like, you know what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to see what authors are at these conventions on top of the ones, because we go as authors and stuff like that and as publishers. And I'm going to dress like some of these characters from their books and just start a whole trend of showing up and like, I am this person, and seeing if they just stand in line for their book and see if they even get it when I'm standing, I think that's...
And of course, some characters don't have... I mean, like, I'm just thinking about the precinct characters you can, because you have to create the armor. So that would be distinctive because that has a particular look. The rest of my characters, I mean, Cassie Zukov is just, a tall blonde chick who wears T-shirts and shorts. Brom Gold is a Jewish guy with dark hair and a beard who wears, like, turtlenecks, It
was in the middle of Key West, and I showed up with a beard and a turtleneck.
No. Brom works in New York. The one with the T-shirt and shorts is the Key West one.
I know, but I'm just saying, show up one of your book signings in Key West with this turtleneck and a beard.
There you go. Yeah, that was
I get it now.
Yes.
So, when did you publish your first world book of your own? Like, you created the world?
That would be 2004 when Dragon Precinct was published by Simon & Schuster. Which I thought would be the first of a series, which it was eventually, but the imprint, Simon & Schuster created an imprint for science fiction and original science fiction and fantasy. But then it was discontinued in 2005, and I was kind of left flapping in the breeze.
I think you and others were left flapping in the breeze when... Yeah,
I mean, at least some people got to finish their stuff, and a few of them, they later started up doing original stuff again, but they were fussier about what they were taking, and they weren't... Epic fantasy wasn't really in there. They were looking more for urban fantasy or straight-up science fiction. So I didn't get much of a... they weren't interested in picking up the sequel. Eventually, it was picked up by a small press publisher in 2011. Then that publisher kind of fell into the swamp in 2016. And so I switched over to eSpec Books, who published Mermaid Precinct and then did new editions of the previous books.
Did you?
And they're going to be doing the subsequent books in the series they'll be doing as well.
Have you self-published at all?
No.
Oh, that was quick.
No, and it's not because I think self-publishing is a bad thing. Quite the opposite. If you can do it, great. But and this is the thing I always tell people who ask if they want to self-publish. I say go for it, but when you decide to become a professional writer, you have decided to become a single proprietor, small business who is in the business of selling your art. If you decide to become a self-publish, to publish your own work, then you have decided to become a completely separate, albeit related, single proprietor, small business that is in the business of investing in art. And I barely have time to run the business I'm running. So the reason why I don't self-publish is because I don't have the time to do that. I'm too, and I don't have the time I would need to spend to do all the other stuff I have to do that a publisher does. I would rather somebody else did that. I'm capable of doing it. And in fact, because my wife and I are stupid, we started a small press this year. But we're only going to do like one project every 2 years or something. And it's going to be an anthology that we think would be cool. And it's probably not going to go beyond that. Of course, I say that now. In 5 years from now, we'll be publishing 12 books.
I was going to say, I'll be interviewing in 5 years. You'll be like, we have 30,000 books out. And
yeah. So you never know. But because we both, between the two of us, we have all the skills necessary to do this. But it's not something I particularly want to do. I'd rather have a publisher do it. I'm happy with the publishers that I have. And, again, also the tie-in work, that's all with particular publishers because I don't have the money to buy to purchase a publishing license. But for my own stuff, I'm happy with my publishers and I'm happy for them to do the production work, the editing work, producing the covers, the distribution. That's all stuff that I'm perfectly happy to fob off on somebody else.
No, totally. And trust me, we decided to create.
I mean, I like the fact that it's an option now. You know, certainly the technology exists that it's easy for one person to do it all if they wish. But it's not something that I particularly want to do.
Yeah, as an author,
our publication company in the beginning of 2020. We still done fairly well, but we decided, to pick the exact time to create a publishing company.
Yes.
So one other thing I wanted to ask you is that you created all this. You do the comics, you've done the short stories. Do you have a favorite, or do you like kind of mincing it all? Because they're very different. Creating a short story, like some novelists cannot do a short story to save their freaking lives. They just cannot condense
a lot of practice
into a small enough thing to do it. And some people love writing short stories. Some people love writing novels. Some people love writing comic book screenplays. Do you have a preference, or?
I mean, the one I've done most of is novels, but no, I've actually done more short stories. But I mean, in terms of word count, I've done more novels. I like them all. I'm some stories are better suited to the short form, some are better suited to the long form. I love writing comics too. I don't do nearly enough of it, although I enjoy the ones I've done. Writing the Farscape comic book was one of my best professional experiences in my career, partly because I got to work with Rockne O'Bannon, who created Farscape, so that was part of the fun there. Cool. But even the ones I didn't do directly with Rockne, because I also wrote 3 Dargo miniseries that I wrote on my own. And honestly, I'm really proud of those 3, especially the third one. I think Dargo's Quest was some of my best work. I don't know how many people actually read it, but I was really proud of that one.
I think that's awesome. Where do you get a lot of your inspiration from for your work?
Everywhere. There's no place I don't get inspiration. It comes from all sorts of different sources. I mean, the Cassie Zukov stories I started writing because I kept going to Key West and thinking, wow, this would make a great place for an urban fantasy setting. The Brom Gold books came about because I worked for the U.S. Census Bureau in 2009 and 2010 and got to explore different parts of the Bronx as a crew leader for the census. And that got me thinking, there's stories I can tell here, because when people write stories about New York City, it's usually about Manhattan south of 125th Street. The outer boroughs and upper Manhattan are usually ignored if they're even acknowledged. I mean, if they want to get really edgy, they might do Brooklyn, but otherwise, and certainly the Bronx is always ignored. That's been true my entire life. And so I thought it would be cool to write a story that takes place in my home borough. Dragon Precinct came about because of the characters that I had created. Both Torrin and Danthras, the 2 main characters in the Precinct series, were originally role-playing game characters that I'd done in college and in my 20s. And I loved them so much, I wanted to do something with them. And I wrote 414 different terrible novels before I finally settled on the idea of making them cops. And what may be my best novel is one of my Star Trek novels, which was called The Art of the Impossible. That was inspired by a 30-second conversation between Dr. Bashir and Garak in a Deep Space Nine episode, which made a passing reference to the Batrika Nebula incident, which was never mentioned again. And all we knew was that it was an incident between the Klingons and the Cardassians. It was ages ago, according to Garak, and peculiarly for an incident, it lasted 18 years. Armed only with that, I created a 100,000-word novel called The Art of the Impossible, which I'm still incredibly proud of. I think it's one of my best books. Sometimes the inspiration is an editor walking up to me saying, "Hey, Keith, I want you to write a book about X." One of my most well-reviewed books is another Star Trek novel I did called Articles of the Federation, which was basically a year in the life of the Federation president. Oh, wow. And my editor came to me and said, "Hey, we want to do a Star Trek version of The West Wing. You should write it." I'm like, okay. And that's how that happened. And it's funny because the book sold terribly, but it's probably my best reviewed book. It's like nobody bought the book, but the few people who did buy it loved it. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's it. I think that's great, and I think it's true. I get a ton of my writing ideas from people watching, and also living in.
For that matter, the sometimes just a line of dialogue. My Zorro story that I wrote, which is for More Tales of Zorro in 2011. I wanted to do the secret origin of Captain Monasario, who's Zorro's main bad guy. And a line just dumped into my head out of nowhere with Monasario saying to Zorro, "You see, Zorro, while your mask frees you, my rank shackles me." And the whole story built out of that.
Good dialogue.
That's an epic line.
And from there, like the whole story core dumped into my head, and I'm sitting on the bus, and I'm like, "Get me home, come on, hurry up, get me home." And like I get home, I run to the house from the bus stop. I briefly acknowledge the existence of my then girlfriend and say, "Gotta write the story." Sit down, and the story jumps out and writes itself down. It was called Letter from Guadalajara, which I think is one of my best stories. And it all came from just, that one line of dialogue, and it just steamrolled from there. The ideas come from all sorts of different places. The other plot in the CSI New York book I mentioned, the prison one came out of me just wanting to do that, and I knew I had it in with Arthur Kill. The other one was I wanted to do a murder there was a coffee shop in my neighborhood where I lived at the time where I did a lot of my writing. So I wanted to set a murder there. What the hell? Sometimes it's as simple as that.
Don't kill people where you write. We should make a sticker that says that.
What could possibly go wrong? Well, in fact, the place has since shut down, but I'm sure it had nothing to do with it.
That is unfortunate. Okay, we are near the end of this episode.
But we just started.
I know. Moments ago.
I still have wine left.
We're going to have a follow-up literary briefs, and we can...
Okay, fair enough.
Shots.
And besides, there's more wine in the bottle.
Oh,
yes.
Love that bottle so much. Oh, my God. Okay, so what advice would you give authors out there?
Finish what you start. It is much easier to revise and improve and make better a completed work than it is a fragment. And also, the first draft is allowed to suck.
Yes. I tell people that all the time. It's not meant to be perfect the first time around.
Exactly. Just get through to the end. Just keep putting one word in front of the other until you're done. The words don't have to be perfect. In fact, a lot of the words are going to be anyhow. So just get through to the end and finish it. The ratio of stories that have been started to stories that have been finished is about 8 billion to 0.5. Just finish it. If you finish it, you're already ahead of the game. And then once you've got a completed story, whether it's a short story, novel, screenplay, whatever, once it's done, you can mold it, you can fix it, you can tweak it, you can rearrange it, you can do whatever you need to do to it, but finish it first.
I love that. Okay. How should people find you? What would you recommend?
Well, if you
just promotion,
if you just search for Keith R.A. DeCandido or just Keith DeCandido on the internet, I'm the only one you're going to find. So, but my webpage is decandido.net, my last name.net. It's a terrible website, but it's a handy link dump for all the various places that I can be cyberstalked. I'm fairly active on Facebook. I've got both a personal page and a fan page, and they both have the same material on it. So if you can just like my fan page and search for Keith R.A. DeCandido on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I have a blog that I actually do update on a regular basis, which is on WordPress. And all of it, like I said, if you go to decandido.net, you can find it there. I write regularly for Tor.com. I've been doing a Star Trek Voyager rewatch twice a week. That'll be followed by a Star Trek Enterprise rewatch. I've already done the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine. I've been reviewing new episodes of the new Star Trek series as they come out. Every 6 months, I revisit my great superhero movie rewatch, where I talk about the various live-action movies based on comic book superheroes. I covered all of them that existed at the time between 2017 and early 2020. And because there's always new ones, I've been, like I said, revisiting the feature every 6 months or so. I'm going to have a lot to cover at the end of this year.
Yeah. And what is your next work coming out?
Next thing that's coming out would be conveniently, I have the book right here.
Woo.
This is an anthology called Devilish and Divine, which is edited by John L. French and Daniel Ackley McPhail. It's a story about angels and demons. It's My story is about specifically both a clash, between Islamic guardian angels and Christian guardian angels. It's called Unguarded. It also takes place in the same setting as the Bram Gold books and the and All the Way House, except this is with another courser, a woman named Yolanda Rodriguez, who I created for the Badass Moms anthology, and liked her so much I wanted to keep writing her. So she's actually going to be in the next Bram Gold book, which I'm in the middle of. The other things I've got coming out, at least one of them I can't talk about yet because I signed a non-disclosure agreement, but it's going to be really cool. It's going to be a comic book project that I'm doing with Tokyo Pop. And then I've also got the next Bram Gold book, which is called Feet of Clay, feet spelled F-E-A-T. Again, love the puns. And then Phoenix Precinct, which is the next book in the Precinct series. My collaborator, Dr. Munish K. Batra, with whom I wrote a thriller called Animal, which came out earlier this year, he and I are shopping around a medical thriller, which is under the current working title of Pigman. But I have no idea if anybody, that's still being shopped to publishers. And he and I are also talking about a sequel to Animal, which, if we do it, will be published by Wordfire Press, as the first one was. What else?
You're not busy at all. I mean,
no, not at all.
Nothing's happening.
I love it. I love it. All this creativity and writing happening. It's fantastic.
And I've got a bunch of proposals out that I'm waiting to hear on, so we'll see.
Wow. Well, so if one wants to read you, there is something to read, more than one book.
Yeah. Just recently, there's All the Way House, there's Animal. I also did I collaborated with David Sherman on a military science fiction book called To Hell and Regroup that came out last year. So.
Very cool. You have been thoroughly fun and amazing to have on this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Welcome. And God, all these different aspects. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Okay. So this has been Drinking with Authors. I've been your host, Erica Lance. And with me today has been
Valerie Willis. I almost forgot.
God, did you not remember? It's like the one part of the show.
It's even like written down in front of you, like in the lower left
hand corner. It's not written down. It's been a while. I haven't had a podcast with you guys in a while.
No, I meant on your screen.
It's really on your screen.
Right there.
No, I cannot. Why do I drink? I should not drink on this show.
Oh my God.
It's called Drinking with Authors. You have to drink.
Yeah, exactly.
It's on the label.
Wow. Okay. Well, this has been Drinking with Authors, and Valerie has been the example of why we can't have nice things, and we're going to see you guys next time. Bye.
Will Mila and Matt give each other all or nothing? After my scumbag fiancé cheated on me, I decided I needed to land a job with the NHL team in Seattle. Only problem is, I know nothing about hockey. I'm trying to leave my bad choices and deception in Chicago by getting traded to the Seattle Whalers. I need to keep my head in the game and not be distracted. I'm trying to forget about the hot, anonymous one-night stand I had in the hotel after my interview. I can't get that sexy redhead out of my mind. A steamy romance with the heat of hockey player action on the ice and in the sheets.
Welcome to Drinking with Authors, the Literary Briefs edition. Val, take it away.
No.
Oh, it's fine. I'm going to do it anyway.
I have to ask the question: is there also a literary boxers podcast, or is that?
Yes, and a literary thong podcast, and a literary hipster.
We talked about getting a sponsor that actually does underwear for this.
That would be very appropriate.
Today I'm wearing this. Sponsor any podcast if you let them. We will. Okay, so this is the Literary Briefs edition. I am your host, Erica Lance, and with me today is my co-host is
Valerie Willis.
Okay, and Val, do you want to introduce our guest?
Our guest is Keith DeCandido.
DeCandido.
I gave you like an entire hour to memorize that.
It's not that I could spell it all day long, but
hey, that puts you one up on most people. So
we're going to talk about what we're drinking because you have been. So in case that isn't incredibly obvious. Yes. Kettle One Botanical Vodka Spritz, not Spritzer, Spritz. And this one is it's made with vodka, botanicals, and natural flavors and sparkling water. And I'm listing that because I don't know what botanicals. It's like they put grass in it or something.
It just reminds me of Herbal Essence shampoo commercial.
Yeah.
Okay. Peach and Orange Blossom, not actual orange, but orange blossom. Val, what are you drinking?
I have what little is left of my Irish coffee with Captain Morgan.
That is not Irish coffee because
I don't know what it is. Coffee and rum? I don't know. It's coffee with it's spiked coffee. There we go.
Yeah, because you do realize the Irish weren't like, let's drink coffee.
This is why when I go to your house, I have you make the drinks because I don't drink. I don't know what I'm doing.
I'm very well aware of that. What are you drinking?
I am drinking a red wine, a Rioja called Her Name is Rioja, which has the retro 1980s Duran Duran style label on it because we are ridiculous. It was put together by The Crew, which is a group of people, some of whom are fellow authors of mine, including David Mack, Aaron Rosenberg, Jennifer Purcell Rosenberg, Alana C. Meyer, Glenn Howman, and some others I'm forgetting because I've been drinking for a while, as well as other folks who are not actual writers but are associated with publishing or were married to people in publishing or whatever.
I'm very excited.
We put together a new wine every year, and
this year it is the Full Monty, right?
Yes, it's a Montepulciano that we called the Full Monty because, again, puns.
I'm gonna be emailing you about this. I'm excited. Okay, so this is rapid fire questions. You ready?
No, but go ahead.
Okay, good. What is your favorite book of all time?
Frankenstein by Mary Shelley.
Ooh,
why?
good choice.
It captivated me when I first read it in college, and it's pretty much the forerunner of the entire science fiction genre. It does a wonderful job of both capturing the romantic literature ideal of the power of nature, and also subverting it in a lot of different ways and questioning it. And also she wrote it when she was 18, and it's fucking awesome. So, but I love the story of Mary Shelley's life, and I love the story of Frankenstein in particular. Just the depth of the creator completely screwing up their own creation, and the fact that actions have consequences, and that's something that I've always been interested in my fiction, is the consequences of actions, and Frankenstein embodies that in so many ways. So.
Does it drive you nuts when people screw up the Frankenstein's monster thing?
Nah, I'm over that. Mostly I'm waiting for there to be a good adaptation of the novel. There have been some great movies done based on it, but there hasn't been a good straight up adaptation of the original novel. What especially irritates me is the version of the monster that is closest to what Mary Shelley wrote is in, of all places, the incredibly terrible 2004 Hugh Jackman movie Van Helsing. The version of Frankenstein's monster in that is phenomenally good. And I can't remember the name of the actor off the top of my head who played him, but he just did an amazing job. I'm actually looking on the internet.
You Google right now to solve that particular.
Yeah,
solve this right now.
He was incredibly good. Shuler Hensley, who was perfect. That was the only time I recognized Mary Shelley's monster on screen, and that includes the movie Mary Shelley's Frankenstein that Kenneth Branagh directed. And I am abject in my love of Kenneth Branagh as a director, but he screwed the pooch on that one in so many ways.
You could always write that screenplay.
Oh, sure, and use all my Hollywood connections to get it made. Yeah, that'll work.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, we're
I will make use. I will make use of all my Hollywood connections, of which I have none.
Okay. So, what is your least favorite book you've ever read?
Oh.
I'd rather not say. I don't like to slag other authors, even ones who are bad at it.
Are you like a do not finish if it's bad, or do you force yourself to finish it?
Usually I don't finish. Like if it's a book I don't like, and there are some books that I just don't like. Like for example, I didn't like Phil Pullman's His Dark Materials. I recognize that it's a good piece of work. I just didn't like it. And so I stopped reading it. For that matter, I never read beyond the first Harry Potter book. I read the first book. I thought it was fine. It didn't do a lot for me. I understand and appreciate its place in literary history. I understand that it did a lot to get kids to read throughout the late 90s and early 2000s. But it just never did anything for me. But that's my own thing. That's not, that doesn't mean that they're bad works. It's just not for me. But I'd really, actually, no. Now that I've said that, there's one book I'm perfectly happy to say is a terrible book. It's a book called The Pleistocene Redemption, and I can't even remember the author's name, but it was a self-published book from the 1990s that was just really bad. And the author sent it around to everybody in SIFWA to try to get it a Nebula nomination.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and it was incredibly bad.
Well, and so what pushes you out of a story? What will be the thing that instantly you're like, and I'm done?
Characters I don't care about. That's the biggest one. I need to be invested in the characters. To give a more positive example, one of the reasons why I love pretty much every Star Trek series has been, and even the Star Trek series I don't like as much as some of the others, I'm still invested in the characters. I'm still interested in the characters. The characters are people I care about what happens to them. And that's the thing that I really need. It's one of the reasons why I never liked Seinfeld, for example. These were people I didn't really give a shit about. And if I'm not invested in the fate of the characters, I'm not going to be interested.
I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
What about your writing? What do you have a particular sort of thing you have to look out for? You do editing. You've been an editor a long time. But I feel like a lot of writers have particular things, whether or not you put a little post-it on your computer
or
to go
bad habits.
Say that.
Or
yeah. Find and replace that.
Erica's
there are words I tend to get fond of and overuse. I overuse M-dashes way too much. And I don't put in enough description, and that's still a problem. I need to my books sometimes suffer from white room syndrome, where everybody's in a blank white room. Because I haven't actually described it. Those are probably my biggest failings.
I don't know. I almost feel lack of description is not quite as bad as over describing something. I've seen.
Well, they're both bad for different reasons. They're trying to hit a happy medium there.
Yeah. No, totally. Okay. So, Val, what is your rapid fire question with your drinkingness?
Wait, what's your favorite urban legend or cryptid?
Oh God. My favorite urban legend, just because it's so ridiculous, is and I actually, back in 1997, the late Josefa Sherman and I co-edited an anthology of stories based on various urban legends. And probably my two favorite are, because one I learned from my ex-wife, who was a scuba diver, is the idea that they find the charred corpse of a scuba diver in a forest fire.
I remember that.
Yes.
I remember that.
There's a forest fire, and there are these helicopters with scoops, and they will scoop water out of the ocean and dump it on the forest fire, and they accidentally scooped up a scuba diver and dumped them on the forest fire.
Yep.
And the other one is when I was a kid, Bubble Yum came out, and Bubble Yum had little streaks of sugar in it that looked like spider eggs. And so there was a whole legend going on that there were actual spider eggs in the Bubble Yum, and that if you were not careful, the spider eggs would hatch and eat you alive from inside, eat your mouth alive from inside. So,
it sounds like it should be worthy of a Garbage Pail Kid sticker.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, I remember Garbage Pail Kids.
And as for cryptid, my favorite is currently the Jersey Devil, just because it's making me money right now. So
the Jersey Devil it's fun, and it's a very Americanized one.
Completely. And I love the fact that they've actually named a hockey team after it. You know,
right.
My two favorite sports team names are the Jersey Devils and the Baltimore Ravens. Just because the idea that a football team named after an Edgar Allan Poe poem is just completely ridiculous.
What about the like ghosts and stuff like that? We didn't talk a lot about paranormal stuff in that regard. Cryptids is one thing. What about ghosts?
What about ghosts? Have
you written a lot about ghosts?
Well, one of the main characters in the Cassie Zukov stories is the ghost of an old record captain. One of my supernatural novels, which also takes place in Key West, is entirely about a demon supercharging various ghosts on the island, including the ghost of Ernest Hemingway, the ghost of Mel Fisher, the ghost of Harry S. Truman. Ghosts are fun to play with.
Do you believe in ghosts?
God, no, but I don't believe in gods either, and I write about them a lot too.
Well, it doesn't mean you can't write.
I don't believe in magic, and I write about that. Don't have to believe in it to write about it.
What do you think is your? We talked about a bad habit. What is your best trait you think as a writer? What do you do well as a writer?
Character voices. And I'm saying that partly based on what other people have said about my writing. And I think it's one of the reasons why I've been able to navigate so many different universes, is I make it, and it's a conscious effort on my part, and I seem to be good at it, is getting the voices of the characters right.
Do you go back and read your previous work?
I do, for research purposes. Like if I'm going to write a new Precinct book, I go back and read all the other previous Precinct books so I can get the universe in my head. Plus, sometimes I'll have seeded something. It's like, oh yeah, I got to pick up on that. Because I forget, because I've written so many things and because I'm old and feeble. I wouldn't
say feeble.
No. So yeah, I'll do that. For that purpose.
Do you? Oh, I had a question. It was right there.
Where did it go, Erica? What were you thinking before that?
Oh, no, it was you meeting other authors, because you know a lot of authors. You've been in the business a while. And,
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, just like a few minutes or so.
30 years.
Yeah, whatever, 30 minutes, 30 years. What is it like meeting people you are a fan of?
It's interesting. Because I started out as an editor, I was working with lots of people. Most of the time, it's not that big a deal. There are only two instances where I've turned into a drooling fan goober. One was when I met Ursula Le Guin, which was at a ReaderCon sometime in the 90s. I want to say 94, 95, thereabouts. Le Guin is one of my absolute heroes. She is both one of my biggest influences as a fiction writer and as a nonfiction writer. Her essays are just brilliant. Dancing on the Edge of the World is a collection of her essays, and it's one of my Bibles. And when I met her, I just made a complete drooling fucking idiot of myself. The other one, and I love this story because it was hilarious. I was joking before about how I have no Hollywood connections. That's not really true. I know a bunch of screenwriters and a few producers. But one person I'm friends with is Ashley Edward Miller, who has worked on things like Andromeda, Fringe, Thor, X-Men First Class, a bunch of others. And Ash introduced me to Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert Meyer Burnett is, among other things, the director of Free Enterprise, which is one of my favorite movies. Free Enterprise is a movie that came out in 1999 and features a couple of Star Trek fans who are based on Robert himself and Mark Altman. And they actually get to meet William Shatner, and Shatner plays this ridiculous version of himself, and it's hilarious. But I love this movie because I watched this movie, and it's like they followed me and my friends around and did a movie about them. And so I love that movie so much. And Ash introduces me to Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm going like, oh my God, I love Free Enterprise, one of my favorite things. And Robert is not paying any attention to this because he's too busy fangoobering me because he's read my Star Trek novel articles of the Federation, and he loves it, and he thinks it's one of the best Star Trek books ever written. So he's going on and on and on about how much he loves my work. So we're fangoobering each other, and Ash is just standing there smiling, you know.
That is awesome. That would be awesome.
But no, I've met lots of people who've worked I've admired, but most of them it's been on a professional level, and they're just people, you know. And I mean, it's been great to work with them in some cases. You know, like for example, Peter David went from somebody whose work I loved to somebody who's become a good friend. I was at his wedding, you know. You know, he's become a very good friend over the years. Well, you know, other people who become writers I've admired. David Mack is one of my closest friends. He's turned into a great writer, but I knew him before that, you know. You know, there's lots of people whose work I've admired, who I've gotten to work with, or I've become friends with, and it's been great. It's one of the things I love about the life I've gotten to lead. I've gotten to work. I got to work with Stan Lee.
And that's amazing.
Yeah, when we were doing the Marvel project that I was talking about before, Stan was the editor of the anthologies we did, which in real terms meant he wrote an introduction for each one, and then but putting his name on the cover helped sell the books, obviously. But it was great to work with. What I especially loved about working with Stan was that wasn't an act. He was really like that. He had a great work ethic too. He never was late with anything he had to do for me. He always hit his deadlines. In fact, sometimes he was early. He had a phenomenal work, and it was so much. He enjoyed his life. He enjoyed what he did. There was at the San Diego Comic-Con, and I want to say 1996. We took him out to dinner because Byron did a lot of work with Stan over the years, not just the Marvel books. And we took him and his wife out to dinner. And we're sitting there. Is Stan spending this business dinner talking to his publisher, his editors, any of that? No. He is spending it with Byron's then 8-year-old daughter, playing with the action figures she had just bought on the floor that day. That's how he spent his business dinner.
That is amazing.
Yeah. I getting to work with Stan is another one of those things that was like, that made it all worthwhile.
Well, you know, it's interesting you say that, because I was even today, my day job, I work doing HR, and I give this talk that my team keeps setting me up to give this same talk to all these different groups. They're like, you got to keep giving this talk. And one of the things I always talk about is that in life, when you get to the end of whatever your life is, right, what you have is your memories. That's what you get to take with you. Regardless of anything else, you get to take your memories with you. And what do you want those to be? Because your memory doesn't need to be you slaved, 80 hours a week for a job you hated, blah, blah, blah. It's not a memory you want to have. And, hearing your stories, I go, here's a guy who has got this full bucket of memories to pull out of, which is amazing. And I think when you get to do something you love and you enjoy and you're passionate about and you can create, you get these memories by default, Meeting all the cool people. Every author, I've been very fortunate. We're actually coming up in a few episodes on the 200th episode of this show, right? Wow. And so I've gotten to meet so many amazing authors like yourself, and I get to nerd out. I look cool, calm, and collective, unlike some people. I'm not going to mention.
That's what she likes dragging the rest of us on, me and the editors, because we'll geek out, so she doesn't have to.
I'm geeking out. I just do it in a more professional way.
Yeah.
Slightly more
professional-ish.
Very professional. But
yeah.
It's just amazing to meet people who are you're just people. That's the coolest part. Like, you're not getting on a show and I'm, talking to you and you're going, let me be stuffy. Here's the only things I'm going to answer, blah, 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 blah. Because I'm like, that's not fun. It's so amazing.
One of the, it's always interesting in particular because I've met a lot of actors at various conventions and things. And the ones that stick with you are the ones who are genuinely interested in what they do and in talking to the fans and who have also invested in their characters to some extent. I remember one time I did a radio show with Keith Hamilton Cobb, who played Tyrion Asazi on Andromeda back in the early 2000s. And he was incredibly thoughtful. he had given a considerable amount of thought to what his character was and what his character's motivations were and why he did what he did. And it was just fascinating. And then, there are other actors who were like, yeah, it was a job, whatever. And that's fine. But it's always interesting, the different ways people approach it. But it's like you said, they're people. These are people doing a job, and some people love their job and some people don't. But, and I know I've been fortunate. I've been very fortunate to get to work with some wonderful people, work on some wonderful franchises. I mean, I got to, one of those memories you mentioned, because I've done a lot of Star Trek work and I've done a lot of Farscape work, two people who, I mean, calling them friends is perhaps stretching it a bit, but at least good, decent acquaintances, are Armin Shimmerman, who played Quark on Deep Space Nine, and Principal Snyder on Buffy, and Ben Browder, who was the star of Farscape. And there was one time I was at a convention, and it was one of the first conventions I'd gone to with the woman to whom I am now married, Ren. And there was a Meet the Pros party, and Ben Browder was one of the guests, and he and I hadn't seen each other in a while, so we're talking and we're catching up on stuff. And meanwhile, Armin is talking to Ren, and he's quizzing her like he's my uncle, to make sure she's good enough for me, And Ren said it was one of the most surreal experiences of her life to have Principal Snyder basically, quizzing her about that. Because he's not in makeup, so he looks like Principal Snyder. He looks like himself, But that was fun. There's a lot of really cool people I've gotten to meet, particularly on the convention circuit. Aaron Eisenberg, for example, became a good friend. I was really sorry when he passed away a couple of years ago. He was a great guy. He and I talked about writing some books together, and it never happened, unfortunately. For that matter, another one we lost, Jerry Doyle from Babylon 5. I will never, ever forget him at a bar in Indiana in 2001 lecturing me at great length about the evils of drunk driving when he himself was incredibly drunk.
Of course.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. But it's interesting you say, because you get invested in the characters, and I think a lot of people as writers and actors or whatever, fans get invested in the characters. Like, they can love your work, but especially when it's fiction work and stuff, they're getting invested in those characters and the fate. And I think, when you're writing and you're able to be creative and you're able to create the worlds and everything that people are going into, when you have an actor that you run into and you're really invested in, oh my God, you love this character and this character made a difference or something, or you wrote a character and the person's kind of like, meh, it's disappointing because it's so significant to you.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I've gotten that a few times when people have said that something I wrote had an effect on them. One of my favorites, I mentioned Articles of the Federation, which is my Star Trek West Wing pastiche about a year in the life of Federation president. There was one person who basically decided to pursue a career in politics because of that book.
Oh, wow. Well, that's a huge compliment.
Yeah. Yeah, that blew my mind. Still blows my mind 15 years later. And it, it was an incredible thrill and really flattering. And that's the sort of thing that makes it worthwhile. I mean, awards are nice, good reviews are nice, but that's the sort of thing that's like, okay, that's why I do this.
Well, and that stays with you. I mean, obviously you do this, it's a living, we want to make a living doing it. We want it, but it's that impact and having those interactions and having that impact with a fan. I'm sure you've had other fans come up to you about parts of your work that you go, yes.
Yeah.
Right?
A few, yeah. Most of them it's like, wow, that book sucked. No. But
do they speak in a Fozzie voice like that when they come up?
Sometimes, yeah.
Walk up Fozzie voice. If you don't like his books, come up.
I'm being self-deprecating, but no, lots of people, like I've had just as we record this, I am recently back from GalaxyCon in Raleigh, and I had 3 different people who came up to me just for the express purpose of saying how much they loved my work, and how much they enjoyed it, and they appreciated being able to tell me that in person, which was great. It's really satisfying to know that the stuff, the art that you create can touch people.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Do you still game, by the way? You mentioned gaming. Do you still game?
No, but only because I don't have time. I used to game a lot.
Hear the list of books he's about to come out with.
Yeah. And it's funny because I still write fiction based on games. I've done some stuff for the Star Trek role-playing game that Modiphius is doing. I wrote for their Klingon Empire supplement, and I wrote at least a draft of a module that may or may not get published. I'm not very good at writing games, but I've written fiction based on Resident Evil, based on Dungeons and Dragons, based on World of Warcraft, based on StarCraft, Command and Conquer. For that matter, my Alien novel was based on a video game. It was a novelization of the Alien Isolation game. And I added a lot of material to it, but it was basically a novelization of the game. And like I said, the characters of Torin and Danthris from the Dragon Precinct series are RPG characters that I played when I was younger. I just don't have time.
We're going to list it again on this particular version of the podcast on what's coming up for you. If you still feel like listing them, I can see why you don't have time. As a gamer, and we've recently started during the pandemic playing a game again, and I realized how much from a creative standpoint I missed it. Like, because it's, a role-playing game, a true role-playing game, you have so much imagination that gets to go into that game,
She just hates it because I'm a merchant princess.
Shut up about your damn merchant princess. Nobody cares.
No.
Literally nobody cares.
Yeah.
So, oh my goodness. A half an hour passed again. Val, you get the final rapid fire question.
Oh, I get the final one?
You've got to think of it.
No pressure.
No, this is... Okay, you've written for a huge list of franchises and licensed content. Which one is your favorite?
Oh, you can't do that. I'm going to withdraw that question.
No, it's okay. I have 3 answers to that question because that's the best I can do.
That's fine. That's fair. Top 3.
Star Trek, because I have literally been watching Star Trek since birth. Star Trek has been part of my life for as long as I've been alive. I grew up watching it. It still remains one of my absolute favorite science fiction universes. I absolutely adore it, and I'm loving the fact that it's having a renaissance now with so many different new shows on Paramount Plus. And the fact that I've gotten to work in it, and I've done some of my best work, honestly, in the Star Trek universe. So I'd have to say that is one. Farscape for another, just because I love the show and because I got to do so much with it. The comic books that I wrote with Rockne O'Bannon were basically the 5th season of the show. And that was a huge honor and a huge amount of fun to do. And also the novel I wrote, the Farscape novel I wrote back in 2001 called House of Cards, which is the first time I wrote a tie-in novel where the creator of the show walked up to me, did this, and said, "You got it."
Nice.
It was incredibly gratifying. And then the third one would be Marvel, because again, I also grew up reading Marvel comics. Spider-Man has been my favorite superhero since I was a little kid and was watching The Electric Company, which was a kid's show in the 1970s that licensed the right to use Spider-Man for some stories. And I love Spider-Man there. I started reading Spider-Man comics. My first short story and my first novel were both Spider-Man. I love the character incredibly much. And being able to write him and write other Marvel characters as well. I've written the X-Men, Silver Surfer, Thor, the Hulk, and it's been wonderful. I adore those heroes so much and always have. So it'll be a tie among those 3.
That's awesome.
Now I have to ask you, because you gave up your favorite superhero. Who's your favorite captain? You did. You listed your favorite superhero.
You walked into that one.
Opening the door for this question.
I assume you mean on Star Trek.
Yes.
I'm going to cheat and say the one I created, Captain David Gold from the Starfleet Corps of Engineers series that I edited between 2000 and 2007.
That is cheating. That is
it's absolutely cheating, but it's true.
Shameless plug. You should give him kudos.
Yes, Captain Gold was the captain of the Starfleet Corps of Engineers ship, the USS Da Vinci. We did a monthly ebook series between 2000 and 2006, actually, where we chronicled the adventures of the Starfleet Corps of Engineers who fly throughout the galaxy, solving the world's problems and fixing what's broken throughout the universe. And Captain Gold was basically Sherman Potter from the TV show MASH, only Jewish. So,
awesome.
And he was a wonderful character, and I loved writing him. I loved the way other people wrote him. I edited that series for Simon and Schuster, and I wrote several ebooks in the series. In fact, I've been doing, since the apocalypse started last year, I've been doing a YouTube channel called Crad COVID Readings, and I was reading all my short fiction, and that took me through 2020. And then for 2021, what I've been doing is reading my Starfleet Corps of Engineers stories, which are all novella length. I've been reading them in installments every Tuesday, every Trek Tuesday. And I've been going through all the Starfleet Corps of Engineers stories. And the one that's going throughout August of 2021 is a story called Breakdowns, where we get to meet Captain Gold's extended family, because he's got a huge family. And I adore that character. If you're going to make me choose among the ones on television,
I'm going to. I was letting you get to the end. This sounded riveting. I love the character idea, but I am going to make you choose one from the actors.
It's really hard to decide between Picard and Sisko, who are two completely different characters, which is why it's so hard to, because but they're both wonderful in different ways.
What is the most, I've got to ask this, because I actually was talking about an episode to interns at my job the other day, and they didn't even get the reference because they're very young. But what is your favorite episode from Star Trek?
It's an odd choice because it doesn't stand on its own, but that's what I like about it. Deep Space Nine episode called "Tacking into the Wind," which was one of the final batch of episodes they did that ended the Dominion War, because that story built on, or what was the culmination of about 10 years worth of stories involving both Klingon politics and the relationship between the Bajorans and the Cardassians. There were two plots in that episode, one involving Worf, who basically kills Gowron in a duel and is made Chancellor, but then sort of passes it on to Martok instead. And then Kira going on a mission where she's helping the Cardassian underground because they're trying to get out from under the Dominion's thumb. And what I love about that episode is that it ties together so many different stories from two TV shows. There's basically stuff going all the way back to the third season of Next Generation in some cases, all the way through all of Next Generation and through all of Deep Space Nine, all the way up to all culminating in this one episode. It's my favorite for that reason. I wouldn't necessarily list it as the best episode, although I think it counts as one of the 10 best episodes of Trek. But I love it because it so beautifully ties all those stories together, and it focuses on my two favorite characters in the franchise, who are Worf and Kira. So,
wow. So the episode I was talking about, and I do not know the name of it, but it was it stayed with me for a really long time, is an episode from Next Generation where there is a Q that wants to kill themselves.
That's Voyager, not Next Gen.
Voyager. No,
yes.
Picard was in that episode, wasn't he?
Nope. It was Death Wish. And Riker had a brief appearance in it, which is probably where the source of confusion was.
Yeah.
But no, that was Death Wish. It was a Voyager episode.
Now I have to
and there's a whole trial and everything.
It's going to drive her crazy now.
But it goes over, this Q and how he talks about being the house and the dog and the wheat field, that one?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and basically he's done all the things, so it's not fun anymore. He doesn't want to do anything because he's done all the things, right? And now I'm going to have to go research this because I swear Picard's in it, but whatever.
And then Q helps him kill him, and then our Q, John Delancey's Q, helps him kill himself.
Yeah, and I love this episode because I tell people if you're at a job and you're not happy, it's because you've been the house and you've been the dog and you've been the cornfield. Like when you've done all those things, like I thought that analogy was great because it wasn't like he was like, I've been a king and I've been all these things. He took such simple things and went, but I did all these things and I just don't want to do them anymore.
Yeah, no, that was a Voyager episode. Garrett Graham played the other Q.
Yeah, no, love that impact. Now I feel just ridiculous because it's now I'm gonna go find it.
Voyager.
But like I said, Riker was in it, which because Q pulled a bunch of different people from history, including Riker. And that you may have remembered that and thought it was a Next Gen episode.
Yeah, because anyway.
Also, the episode itself had nothing to do with Voyager at all. It was just about the Q characters. It
I love
the Voyager characters were barely relevant in it. So.
Yeah, I always thought the Q characters Omni perfect characters. Like I'm gonna go do things, and yet he's a complete dick.
Yes, that was one of the things I loved about Q when we first saw him because it was like, okay, it's another higher being who's testing the Enterprise just like they did 14 times on the original series. But wow, he's an asshole.
Yeah. Usually
they're all ethereal and shit, so.
There are all these things, and he's like, I'm going to just come be a dick, and I'm going to eat your stuff, and I'm going to leave.
I got to write one of my Trek novels was the Next Generation novel called Q&A, which was pretty much the ultimate Q story. It was sort of explaining all of Q's previous appearances, and there was all a purpose to it. And writing Q is so much fun.
I'm writing this down.
Wonderful character to write.
Must.
I'm writing right now because I love that character. So I like the most ridiculous characters and things because he was so over the top. He was so well played.
Oh yeah.
And it, instead of being this ethereal, it's like just this ridiculous character that's like, how you doing? What are you guys up to? Oh, I don't like this. I'm going to go change everything you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we're nearing the end of the episode and I got us sidetracked, why don't you talk about what's coming out? You just had a New Jersey Devil novels, and that was called?
That was called All the Way House. It's part of the Systema Paradoxa series from the Neo Paradoxa imprint of E-Spec Books. It's a whole series of books about cryptids, minus the Jersey Devil, and again, it's called All the Way House. That's out now. I've got an anthology coming out called Devilish and Divine, which has urban fantasy short story in it about various angels that are competing for the ability to card with kid. Currently out is a thriller called Animal, which I wrote with Dr. Manish K. Batra, which is about a serial killer who targets people who harm animals. It's kind of like Dexter if PETA had created it. And then coming out eventually, hopefully in early 2021, will be my next Bram Gold book, which is called Feet of Clay. Feet spelled F-E-A-T. Phoenix Precinct, the next book in the high fantasy police procedural series that started with Dragon Precinct. And also Ragnarok in a Hard Place, which will be a short story collection featuring tales of Cassie Zukov, Weirdness Magnet, which are urban fantasy stories set in Key West, Florida. And meanwhile, I'm still writing for Tor.com. I write regularly for them about pop culture, including a Star Trek Voyager rewatch, reviews of superhero movies and new Star Trek shows. I should have mentioned this on the other podcast. I also have a Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/crad, my initials KRAD, I do TV reviews, movie reviews, cat pictures, excerpts from my works in progress, and my favorite version, which is vignettes featuring my original characters. I've been doing vignettes featuring the Dragon Precinct characters, the Bram Gold characters, the Cassie Zukov characters, the Super City Cops characters. Once a month, I do a new vignette, and that's been a fun way to do little side stories and stuff with the various characters. And I'm also working on a comic book for Tokyo Pop that I can't talk about because I signed a non-disclosure agreement, but it's going to be really cool when it happens. So.
Awesome. And as we now noticed again, he's not busy at all whatsoever.
No, not at all. No.
I want to thank you again for being on this podcast. You are just thoroughly entertaining and amazing. And
thank you for sharing many memories with us.
Yes. Incredibly jealous of your life right now. So in the great Skinwalker thing, I'm going to work on that. No, just kidding. Yeah, I'm going to figure out how to do that. Anyway, thank you again for being on the show. I've been your host, Erica Lance. My co-host today has been
Valerie Willis.
And we will see you guys next time.
Take care. Salud.